Hello doctors, welcome back to Pirates of Medicine. In today's video, we are going to start with the physiology base. We are going to keep this series a short series with 6 videos only. So we will try to incorporate as many questions as we can in this video. So without any further delay, let's begin. So the first question is that the patient with hypersecretion of gastric juices was recommended to exclude from his diet concentrated bouillons and vegetable decoctions because they stimulate gastric secretion. What is the dominating mechanism of stimulation of secretion of this case? So in the stomach we have a various types of cells in the gastric pits on the mucosa of the stomach. So one of these cells is the G cells which stimulates secretion of gastrin. We also have D cells which have an inhibitory effect by secreting somatostatin, and parietal cells, you all know, secrete caselin-Trecek factor and HCl. Also we have these cells called as enterochromaffin like cells which secrete histamine, and they are coupled with histamine receptors, H2 receptors of the stomach. So let's see the mechanism. So when we eat food and it reaches the stomach, the presence of food, it stimulates the G cells which secrete gastrin. This gastrin stimulates the ECL cell or the enterochromaffin like cell to secrete histamine into the stomach. Now this histamine, what it does, it stimulates the parietal cell and activates the proton pump in the parietal cell, which leads to intensive production of acid in the stomach. Now this acid will lead to the activation of pepsin and all the other functions, and the D cells, they recognize hyperproduction of this acid and have a negative effect on the G cells by decreasing gastrin secretion. So anyway, you can see that in the question they said that bouillons and vegetables stimulate gastric secretion. So you can see how they do that by stimulating G cells to secrete gastrin, and that is our answer. Understood? Let's go to the next one. So the second question is that a person felt thirsty after staying in a heat for a long time. They're asking signal of what receptors caused it first of all. So when we are dehydrated, and in that condition there is less amount of water present in our blood plasma, that is detected by various receptors located throughout the body, and hypothalamus is the thirst center in our body. So what does hypothalamus do, and which receptor does it take input from? So first of all, hypothalamus receives feedback from its own osmoreceptors. These receptors are responsible for detecting if the amount of water in our blood plasma is low. So these are like cells present in the hypothalamus, and when they detect that the body is dehydrated, they shrink and they signal the hypothalamus and pituitary axis that the body is thirsty and it needs water, and in this way the thirst center is activated, which makes us feel as that we are thirsty, drink water, and also it releases ADH or vasopressin into the body. Other receptors which detect pressure are baroreceptors of aortic arc, baroreceptors of carotid sinus in the neck region, atrial stretch receptors in the atrium of the heart. Now these receptors have to do with blood pressure, but the receptors which are responsible for detecting low level of water in the blood plasma are osmoreceptors. That is why the answer is osmoreceptors of hypothalamus. Third question is that an individual is characterized by rounded face, broad forehead, Mongolian type of eyelid fold, which we called as an epicanthic fold, flattened nasal bridge, permanently open mouth, projecting lower lip, protruding tongue, short neck, flat hands and stubby fingers. So they are asking on this morphological clinical manifestation what diagnosis can be put to the patient. So these are characteristic symptoms which are seen in Down syndrome. Down syndrome is also called as trisomy 21. It has a genetic etiology. And there are three types of Down syndrome. The trisomy 21 due to non-disjunction of chromosome 21. The translocation Down syndrome due to translocation of chromosome 21 to another chromosome like 14, 15 or 22. and mosaic Down syndrome, in which the body has a mixture of cells, some of them having normal 2 copies while the other have 3 copies of chromosome 21. Now the classical features are as follows of a patient with Down syndrome. They have a broad flat face, slanting eyes, epicanthic eye fold, Mongolian type of eyelid, short nose, short hands and broad hands, and all these other symptoms you can see. Now these symptoms, they are in accordance with the question. That is why our patient is suffering from Down syndrome. Understood? Simple. Let's go to the fourth one. So purulent endometritis developed in a woman after delivery. Pay attention to this question. Treating with antibiotic inhibitor of murin synthesis was ineffective. Wide spectrum bactericidal antibiotic was administered to her. In 6 hours, the temperature rose to 40 degrees C with shivering. Muscle pains developed and the BP dropped down drastically to 70 systolic and 40 diastolic. Oligonuria developed. So what is the main reason of development of this condition? So you can see over here that the woman was suffering from purulent inflammation of endometrium. Correct? And she was giving some antibiotics which were ineffective. But then when she was giving these wide spectrum bactericidal antibiotic, everything changed. So this is the point where these conditions start to develop. In 6 hours, temperature rose, muscle pains, blood pressure dropped. What happened after administration of these bacterial? To understand this, we need to understand the mechanism of these antibiotics. So first of all, let's see what a bacteria, what endotoxin is. To understand what endotoxin is, this is a bacterial cell wall. Now, bacteria has 2 types of toxin, exotoxin and endotoxin. Exotoxins are the toxin that bacteria releases, like we release hormones. It makes the exotoxin inside their body and release it by the process of exocytosis. But endotoxins of bacteria are actually a component of the cell wall of the bacteria, which we call as lipopolysaccharide. You can see this is the lipopolysaccharide. So these lipopolysaccharide are actually a bacterial cell wall component, and these are only released into our body when the bacteria dies and the cell wall is destroyed. So these endotoxins are component of outer membrane of gram-negative bacteria specifically, and are released into a circulation only upon disruption of the bacterial death or bacterial cell lysis. Certain antibiotics, specifically bactericidal antibiotics, can cause lysis of gram-negative bacterial cell wall, which leads to release of these lipopolysaccharides into our body. And when these endotoxin or lipopolysaccharides are released into the body, they take part into our bodies like various action, like they bind with the proteins taken up by macrophages and lead to release of various cytokines, which are the cause of these clinical manifestation develop in this case. This is a classical example of endotoxic shock that occurs due to administration of various antibiotics. One of the classic antibiotics that has an endotoxic shock-like action is levomycin. You learn about this in pharmacology. So this is the cause of endotoxic shock, and this occurs due to endotoxin releasing action that happened due to antibiotic killing the bacteria. So fifth question is that secretion of which GIT hormone is primarily decreased in a patient with removed duodenum. So the patient's duodenum is removed. So the 2 hormones specifically, or 2 enzymes or hormones, whatever you can say, cholecystokinin and secretin, are released by the cells on the lining of duodenum. Let's see what happens first of all. When the stomach receives food from the esophagus, the food becomes acidic when it comes in contact with the acidic content of the stomach, the gastric juice. When the stomach completes its protein digesting activity, the food comes down into the duodenum. Now when the food is coming through the pyloric sphincter, the food is actually acidic, and when the acid food comes into the duodenum, it stimulates the release of secretin. This secretin is responsible for functions like asking the pancreas to release bicarbonate, inhibiting the stomach motility and decreasing bile secretion also. Then we have, when the food comes into the duodenum a little more, then the fatty food and amino acids in the duodenum, they stimulate release of cholecystokinin, which has two functions, asking the pancreas to release enzymes and the liver to release bile acid. So these two hormones or enzymes are secreted by the cells of the lining of duodenum, and this is why it leads, if the patient has no duodenum or removed duodenum, then these GIT hormones will be inhibited. Sixth question is that a 2-year-old child experiences convulsions because of lowering calcium ions concentration in the blood plasma. So what function of what structure is decreased? So to understand this, remember that there is low calcium concentration in the blood. So we have this gland called as parathyroid gland around the region of our neck next to our thyroid gland, which has a function of maintaining the calcium level in our blood plasma. Now how does this gland do this function? When this gland detects that the amount of calcium in the plasma is low, it stimulates secretion of its parathyroid hormone. This parathyroid hormone does its function in various ways. First of all, it goes to the bone and does the function of bone resorption. It asks the bone that please, there is less amount of calcium in the blood, please give me some calcium back. So the calcium is resorbed from the bone. Secondly, it goes to the kidney and asks the kidney that there is less amount of calcium in the blood, so please stop secreting calcium into the urine and start its reabsorption. Third, it stimulates the activity of alpha hydroxylase, which stimulates secretion of activated form of vitamin D, 1,2,5 dihydroxycalciferol or calcitriol. This calcitriol is responsible for going to the small intestine and increasing calcium absorption from the food. So these three ways, they ultimately lead to increased calcium in the serum. So this is how parathyroid hormone acts, and if the parathyroid gland has decreased function, the amount of serum calcium will be decreased, which is evident in our question. Let's go to the seventh, that while emotional excitement, the heart rate in a 30-year-old person runs up to 112 beats per minute. What part of the conducting system of the heart caused it? So conducting system of heart is consists of the SA node, the AV node, and then the bundle of His dividing into left and right branches, and into the ventral myocardium it gives the Purkinje fiber branches. So SA node has a pacemaker rate of 60 to 100. It is the normal pacemaker of the heart. And then if the SA node is not working, AV node has a capacity to work as a pacemaker at 40 to 60. Then if the AV node is not working, bundle of His can generate its own 25 to 40 impulses per minute. Purkinje fiber has the same, and other parts don't have, other parts of the heart like atrium and ventricular myocardium, they don't have this pacemaker capability. So in our question, the patient was able to generate 112 BPM, which is a characteristic of SA node, and other conducting system cannot generate heartbeat up to that level. Understood? Good. The eighth is that usage of oral contraceptives with sex hormones inhibits secretion of hypophyseal hormones. Secretion of which of the indicated hormones is inhibited while using oral contraceptives? Now, these oral contraceptives are just the synthetic form of sex hormones. These are estrogen and progesterone containing oral contraceptives. So they work by inhibiting the same way the estrogen and progesterone inhibit the GnRH and FSH secretion by feedback mechanism. If there is high quantity of these hormones in the body, it asks or it inhibits the pituitary and hypothalamus to stop releasing this GnRH releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, and the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. So these have a inhibitory effect if they are increased. These preparation or these oral contraceptives, they work the same way. They inhibit LH and FSH and thus prevent follicular development and ovulation. Understood? Good. Ninth is that during the breakout of acute respiratory infection, in order to diagnose influenza, the express diagnostics based on revealing specific viral antigen in the examined material nasopharyngeal lavage is being carried out. Which reaction is used for this? So this is a microbiology question. Immunofluorescence assay is a standard virologic technique to identify the presence of antibodies by their specific ability to react with viral antigens. What do they do? We have a specific antigen in a, like for example, say we have to do a immunofluorescence test for influenza diagnostic. So we take the sample from the nasopharynx. If there is a virus present in the nasopharynx, then the antigen of virus will get attached with the primary antibody, and we can observe this immunofluorescence under this microscope. And in indirect, we have a primary antibody which combines with a secondary antibody. This is the only difference between direct and indirect. So immunofluorescence is a quick and reliable method, and this is used for express or quick fast diagnosis. That's all about immunofluorescence. Next question is that a 38-year-old woman was admitted to the admission diagnostic department with uterine bleeding. So what are the most likely changes in the blood? So for understanding this, let's take a look at what hematocrit is first of all. Hematocrit is the proportion by volume of the blood that consists of red blood cells only. So the blood by composition has plasma, buffy coat and hematocrit. Plasma contains waters, plasma proteins, nutrients, hormones, etc. Buffy coat only contains white blood cells and platelets, and hematocrit is composed of red blood cells or erythrocytes. Now, imagine in what conditions will this hematocrit be decreased? First of all, in conditions of anemia, when there is less hemoglobin in the blood, in conditions of hemorrhage, when there is loss of blood, menstrual bleeding, again loss of blood, hemolysis, when the RBCs are getting destroyed, overhydration, when you actually have a lot of plasma due to excessive intake of water, then again the proportion of RBCs will be decreased in comparison. In chronic kidney diseases, when the RBCs are excreted into the urine by hematuria, again hematocrit will be depressed, because hematocrit is just the percentage or ratio of RBCs as compared to plasma. In polycythemia, where RBCs are elevated, the hematocrit will be elevated. So that is, so in hemorrhage or in uterine bleeding as in our patient, there would be low hematocrit. Understood? Let's go to the next one. 11th is that due to action of an electric current on an excitable cell, there appear depolarization of its membrane. So movement of what ions through the membrane cause the depolarization? So remember, depolarization is a process by which cell undergo a change in membrane potential. Normally, the normal resting membrane potential is negative, and by depolarization, the polarity changes and the cell becomes positive. So there is a shift in electrical charge. Now the process of depolarization begins with a stimulus, you can see over here. This stimulus causes a voltage change in the cell, and this leads to opening of voltage gated sodium channel, and sodium channels rush into the cell, causing increased positive charge inside the cell. The membrane potential changes from negative to positive. So sodium channels opening and entering of sodium ions into the cell are responsible for depolarization. Understood? Good. So the 12th question is that the high level activity of LDH isoenzymes concentration showed the increase of first and second isoenzyme of LDH in the blood plasma. They're asking what diagnosis can be most probable. So we read this in biochemistry that LDH enzyme has 5 types of isoenzymes normally. First and second are present in RBCs and heart, and first is more in heart and second is more in RBCs. The third isoenzyme is present in lung, lymphocytes and spleen. Fourth and fifth is present in liver and skeletal muscles. I told you that these enzymes can act as biochemical markers, because when there is any injury to any cell of any tissue, the cellular contents they release into the blood. Now if there is an injury to the say liver or hepatitis for example, hepatitis will lead to injury to the hepatocytes, and the enzymes in the hepatocyte will be released in the blood. So enzymes like LD4 and LD5 will be elevated in the blood serum because they are being released by damaged hepatocyte. Similarly, if there is a damage of heart, say myocardial infarction, the amount of LD1 and LD2 will be elevated because the myocardiopcytes are being injured and they are releasing their content into the blood. So this is why the answer here is myocardial infarction. Understood? Let's go to the 13th question. There is only one hormone among the neurohormones which refers to the derivatives of amino acids according to the classification. Point it out. So we understood in biochemistry that melatonin production occurs from tryptophan. The tryptophan is the precursor. Tryptophan forms 5-hydroxytryptophan. Then it forms serotonin, and from serotonin, melatonin is formed. So in pineal gland, serotonin is acylated and then methylated to yield melatonin, and serotonin itself is formed from tryptophan. So melatonin is the only neurohormone which is formed from a amino acid. So the next question is rather simple one. 14th says that the sterile petri dishes and pipettes are necessary to prepare for microbiological tests in a bacteriological lab. So what way of sterilization should be applied in this case? To sterilize heat resistible glass instruments, we use a method called as dry heat sterilization. What we do is we accomplish sterilization by putting these instruments in a dry heat oven, and the sterilization occurs by the process of conduction. The main aim for dry heat sterilization is protection of these instruments from moisture. So layer by layer heat passes into the instruments and sterilization occurs. So this is the main mechanism, and like petri dishes and pipettes are sterilized by dry heat sterilization. So the next question is that a patient after hypertension stroke does not have voluntary movements in his right arm and leg with increased muscle tone in these extremities. So what type of dysfunction of nervous system is it? First of all, understand paralysis is a loss of total movement of a particular part of the body, and paresis in prospect or in contrast is less voluntary movement, not total loss, less amount of movement occurring due to some pathology. So obviously there is total loss of voluntary movement, so this is a type of paralysis. So is it central or is it peripheral? To understand the difference, let's take a look at the differences. So you will learn more about this in neurology. Central paralysis, from its name you can understand there is an anatomical defect of the cortex or the central nervous system. So the motor part of the cortex is damaged. In peripheral paralysis, there is a damage to the anterior horns, which are the motor function or motor horns of the spinal cord, and the fibers of peripheral motor nerve. So this is a defect of the peripheral nervous system. So what you need to remember from this is that in central paralysis, there is spastic hypertonia. The muscles are very hypertonic. The muscular tone is hypertonic. In peripheral paralysis, there is hypotonia of muscles. So you learn about these reflexes, present or unpresent, in neurology, but remember from here that in central paralysis there is spastic hypertonia of muscles, and in peripheral paralysis there is hypotonia of muscles, which is evident in our question. The patient has increased tone of muscles, so that's why the answer is central paralysis. So the 16th question here is that the blood analysis of a patient showed signs of human immunodeficiency virus or HIV. So which cells does HIV like to primarily affect? So you know that HIV likes to affect the CD4 receptor cells, and out of all these, CD4 receptor cells are T4 helper cells. Let's understand the mechanism. So when HIV comes in contact with the CD4 cells, the GP120 protein on the surface of HIV lock into the CD4 receptor, and other co-receptors like CCR5 or CXCR4 they strengthen this locking. After this, the GP41 protein fuses the HIV envelope into the cell wall of the CD4 cell, and this process allows the HIV capsid to enter the CD4 cell and start the process of reverse transcription. Reverse transcription, converts HIV RNA into HIV DNA by using the host machinery. Then the HIV cell grow inside the CD4 cell, and after growing they leave the host CD4 cell, which leads to death of the CD4 cell. Now these mature young cells, they grow up and then they invade more CD4 cells, and this is how HIV is spread inside the body. So remember, HIV loves CD4 containing T4 helper cells. Next we have 17th question, that the preventive radioprotector was given to a worker of a nuclear power station. What mechanism from the below mentioned is considered to be the main mechanism of radioprotection? So remember, ionizing radiation, may it be of any kind, can affect us or our DNA by two ways: direct damage and indirect damage. Direct damage, it directly breaks the double strands or single strand and leads to irreparable DNA damage, which leads to cell death. In indirect damage, it leads to formation of various free radicals and reactive oxygen species inside the body, which cause oxidative stress and damage to the DNA. The same damage, and ultimately causing cell death. But these reactive oxygen species and free radicals like superoxide free radical, hydrogen peroxide, they are formed by indirect damage of ionizing radiation. So this is why radioprotector is given, so that free radical formation can be inhibited. Understood? Good. 18th question is that X-ray exam discovered lung emphysema in the patient. So what is the reason of short breath development in this case? So remember, lung emphysema is a condition, it can be pathologically defined as an abnormal permanent enlargement of air spaces or alveoli distal to the terminal bronchioles, which is accompanied by the destruction of alveolar walls without fibrosis of the alveoli. You can see this is a normal alveoli, many alveoli, normal shape, and this is alveoli with emphysema. You can see the walls are destroyed and there is increased enlargement of air spaces. Correct? So emphysema leads to dramatic decline in the alveolar surface area. See, alveolar walls are destroyed, the surface area is obviously decreased, even though species is increased, but the surface area of diffusion is decreased, which leads to limited gas exchange in the lungs. So this occurs by two mechanisms. First, the alveolar wall loss leads to decrease in elasticity of the lung. Secondly, the loss of alveolar supporting structures is indirectly responsible for narrowing of the airways, which again limits the airflow. So remember, emphysema causes a decrease in elastic recoil and also causes airway narrowing. So in the question, you can see the reason of short breath is decreased lung elasticity. Correct? In an emphysema, elasticity recoil is decreased. So that's all. Let's go to the 19th. In 19th question, it is said that on experiment on the dog, the peripheral part of the nerve vagus of the neck was irritated. What changes of the heart function would be observed? Remember, innervation of a heart is by the network of nerves called as cardiac plexus. Cardiac plexus contains both nerves, parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic supplies by the left and right vagus nerve, and sympathetic is from the sympathetic trunk. You can observe it over here. Vagus nerve supplying the SA node and the AV node, and the sympathetic nerve supplying the SA node, AV node, and the rest of the myocardium. So the sympathetic nervous system obviously acts on the SA node, speeding up the depolarization rate and increasing the heart rate. The parasympathetic system is antagonist and works to slow the heart rate. So the vagus nerve will slow the heart rate, which is evident in the question. decreased contraction rate due to stimulation of vagus nerve. So 20th question is that power inputs of a boy increase from 500 to 2000 kilojoule per hour. What can be the cause of it? So such drastic change in the energy expenditure is only possible when the person is doing some physical work. Out of all the options, physical exercise is the only viable choice because such drastic change of energy expenditure can only occur when you physically use your body's muscles. Outer temperature increase won't change the energy expenditure. Mental activity won't change until you are a physicist. Food intake again doesn't take much energy. But yeah, transition from sleep to awaking or wakefulness can take a lot of energy if you are a medical student. Anyway, I think that this is understood that the answer is physical exercise. Let's go to the next one. So the 21st question is that a student is thoroughly summarizing a lecture. Just when his groupmates begin talking about the quality, when the groupmates begin talking, the quality of the summarizing worsens greatly. What type of inhibition in cerebral cortex is the cause of it? So this is the question from Mr. Pavlov again. Pavlov was a Russian scientist and he gave various concepts. So first of all, let's understand this. You can understand this from the question itself. The person was doing a work using his central nervous system, and the inhibitory reflex or inhibitory response came from an outside source, the group mates who were talking. So this is an external type of inhibition when the inhibitory stimuli comes from outside. This is why the answer is external inhibition. Understood? Well done. Let's go to the next one. The 22nd question is that in the experiment on the animal, the part of the cerebral cortex hemisphere was removed. It caused the elimination of previously formed condition reflex to light irritation. Remember, light irritation. So what part of the cortex was removed? So if you remember anatomy, you will remember that the occipital cortex or the lobe is the visual processing center of the mammalian brain. It is also referred as Brodmann Area 17 by the Brodmann classification, and the visual cortex is located in the occipital lobe in the back of the brain, and this is required for vision analysis. So in the question there was the elimination of previously formed condition reflex to light irritation. So the cortex that was removed was the occipital cortex because that has to do with vision. So 23rd question is that inhibition of alpha motor neurons of extensor muscles was noticed after stimulating alpha motor neurons of flexor muscles. So what type of inhibition is this? So this is a special case of reciprocal inhibition. Reciprocal, you can understand from the name itself that it is a spinal process of inhibition when inhibition of one motor neuron occurs when its antagonist is activated. For example, imagine you are flexing your arm and your biceps muscle is contracted because that's what you do. Now in response to contraction of the biceps, the neuron supplying the triceps muscle, which is its antagonist, will be relaxed, causing relaxation. When the opposite movement occurs and the arm is extended, the triceps are contracted and the biceps are relaxed. So this is reciprocal inhibition. So it can be best described by the relaxation of muscles on one side of the joint to accommodate contraction on the other side of the joint. So in the question itself, you can see a stimulation of the flexor muscles will lead to inhibition of extensor muscles. So antagonist muscles are being inhibited by stimulation of one type of muscles. So that's reciprocal inhibition for you. So the next question is simple, that respiratory coefficient was studied, or respiratory quotient, we also know this, was studied in the patient who kept the diet for 10 days and the RQ was 1. What diet does this patient have? So to understand this, let's see what respiratory quotient is. Respiratory quotient or respiratory coefficient is a dimensionless number used in calculations of basal metabolic rate. It is estimated that it is calculated from the ratio of carbon dioxide produced to the oxygen consumed by metabolism of any substrate. For example, when you metabolize glucose, amount of respiratory quotient is, when you metabolize glucose, it uses 6 oxygen to form 6 carbon dioxide and 6 water. So RQ will be 6 carbon dioxide upon 6 oxygen, which gives 1. The respiratory coefficient of carbohydrates is 1. Fats, simplest form is palmitic acid. It uses 23 oxygen to form 16 carbon dioxide and 16 water. So RQ comes to be around 0.69, which is equal to 0.7, rounding off. Proteins, albumin, if it is used for energy production, it takes 77 oxygen to form 63 carbon dioxide and 38 H2O, some SO3 and CONH2 voltwise, and the RQ comes to be around 63 by 77 gives 0.8. So in the question the RQ was 1, which says that the patient is taking a diet of carbohydrates. Understood? Good. So the last question for today. On the blood grouping on the system ABO, standard serum of the first and second RBCs or first and second groups causes the RBC agglutination and serum group of third did not. So what antigens or agglutinogens are present in this erythrocyte? To understand this, let's see the classification of blood types. So these are the 4 blood groups. A person can have either of these 4. So in the person with first blood group has RBCs with antigen O. There are no A or B antigen present on their RBC. So we say that their antigen is O. The blood group is O. A person with blood group O will have antibody alpha and beta. Alpha is also called as anti-A and beta is also called as anti-B. These anti-A and anti-B will be present in this person's blood, so that any other blood cannot enter this person's body, and if it enters, these antibody will destroy it. So to protect mixing of blood from a different blood group individual, these antibodies are present. So by the System International, this blood group is written as O, alpha beta antibodies, and first blood group. So similarly, second blood group has antigen A on their RBC membrane, and therefore in response they will have beta antibody, so that a person with blood group A has antibody B, so that any other individual with blood group B cannot donate blood to this patient. So a person with blood group A will have antibody B, and this is the Systemic International classification. Then a person with blood group 3 will have blood group antigen B on their RBC membrane, and in response they will have antibody A in their blood serum, so that A blood group cannot enter their body. So this is written as this. A person with fourth type of blood group will have antigens AB on their RBC membrane, and because they have both these antigens present, they will not have any antibody. So this is why they are universal acceptors. They can accept blood because there is no antibody present in their body and they have both antigens. While O is said as universal donator because O can donate to anyone as it does not have any antigen, and if it does not have any antigen, any person's antibodies will not attack it and it can be used for donation. So for determining blood group using this method, for example, say you have a person with blood group O, so the first blood group, and you are given these 3 serums to detect what is his blood group. So if you will put his blood into first serum, obviously there would be no agglutination because the person with O antigen does not agglutinate from alpha or beta antibody. Alpha antibody agglutinates A and beta antibody agglutinates B. Now the same blood group, when it is given to or dropped into this serum, then again beta antibody will do nothing because there is O antigen. In third also it will not do nothing. So if there is a person with O blood group and his blood is agglutinated with first, second and third and fourth, no agglutination occurs, and you can determine and you can say if there is no agglutination in any of the blood groups, then the answer is that the patient has blood group O. Similarly, if a person with AB blood group is taken and his blood is given or dropped into first, second and third, then the agglutination reaction will occur in each case. Because the person has AB, then A alpha and beta antibody will attack it. Similarly, in second case beta will attack it, and in third group alpha will attack it, causing agglutination. So if agglutination doesn't occur at all, then the blood group is O. If it occurs every time, it is blood group AB. And in other cases of second and third, the blood group is that in which the agglutination doesn't occur. For example, if you have a person with blood group A and you drop its blood into this, there would be no agglutination. But if you drop his blood into third one, the alpha antibody will destroy A. So that is why the person's blood group is A. Similarly, if a person's blood group is B and you drop his blood into this serum, then alpha antibody will not attack it. But if you drop it in this serum, beta antibody will attack it. Therefore, the person's blood group will be B. So let's see the question. In the question, the person's blood was determined and it agglutinated with first and second group, but it didn't with the third group. So I gave you the trick. The blood group of the person is that group which it doesn't agglutinate with. So it doesn't agglutinate with third one, and which gives the blood group to be B. Now this trick is only applicable if the blood groups are second and third. In case of first and fourth, if there is no agglutination in all cases, then it is blood group O. And if there is agglutination in all three serums, then this is blood group AB. Remember this trick. So that is all for today. We completed 25 questions. We'll try to complete this series in 6 videos. So remember to drop down a like and a comment if you like this video. It is very helpful to know that these videos are helping others. So if you have any suggestion or you have any question, drop down a comment below, or you can contact us on the Instagram, Facebook, Telegram page as well. The links are lower part of your screen. So if you have any question, any suggestion, make sure you drop a comment. Anyway, it's been good. See you in the next one.